Good morning and welcome to Jew in the City Speaks with your host, Allison Josephs, also known as Jew in the City. We at Jew in the City, our founding mission is to break down stereotypes about religious Jews. That was kind of what got this whole movement started. The first video that I made on YouTube was back in 2005. And throughout the years, we've got a chance to profile a lot of really cool Orthodox Jews, people doing things that normally break the mold of what you would see Orthodox Jews doing in traditional media. Usually, Orthodox Jews in traditional media are rabbis, diamond dealers, or being abusers. But there's a whole bunch of people in the Orthodox community not doing those things, contributing to the world in positive and meaningful ways. And I think not only having the freedom or ability to do other things, but also the ability to live out their dreams. And I think a lot of the misunderstandings about what an observant Jewish life means is that people think it's far more restrictive than it actually is, or that it needs to be. And so we're delighted to bring you today someone doing something very cool. In his regular professional life, Isaac Rudansky is doing some really cool things. And then he just wrote this children's book that is making a lot of buzz. So let me just tell you a little about who he is. He earned his master's in industrial psychology, and he founded Adventure Media, an award-winning advertising agency. And they write campaigns for clients like AMC, Hearst, Sports Illustrated, NASDAQ. His online courses are #1 bestsellers. They've attracted over 300,000 students worldwide. He writes for industry-leading publications. And his latest book, or his first book, I think it's his first book, Georgie Summers and the Scribes of Scatterplot, a result of years of narrative-driven copyright imagination and a belief that children's books should only do one thing, entertain. He got a six-figure, three-book deal, which is nearly almost unheard of in today's climate. He's got a beautiful quote from J.K. Rowling's literary agent. Georgie Summers and the Scribes of Scatterplot is an unforgettable journey that explores the power of belief and the magic that lies just beyond our world. I have a copy because when I was pregnant, no, when I was nursing our first baby, I think I was in the middle of reading Harry Potter. I think my husband got me the first book when we were first married, and then I was reading the next one after we had our first baby. And I've enjoyed children's fantasy novels since then. And so I figured this could be some good Pesach reading. Isaac, thank you so much for joining us today.
Allison, thank you for having me and for that overly kind introduction. I'm excited to be here. I heard it, I've been following you for a long time, and it's really cool to have this conversation. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of background about how and where you grew up Jewishly.
So I was born and raised in Huntington, Long Island, which is a really nice town on the North Shore of Long Island. My parents started becoming religious around the time I was born. So that created a lot of very interesting dynamics throughout the course of my childhood. But it was a very, very small Baal Tshuva Orthodox community that I grew up in. When I say small, I mean like 9 families, 11 families,
Wow.
13 families at its peak when it was like really crowded. Um, but I loved it. I think I maybe there was elements of it that I did not enjoy so much. But it was a beautiful town, and that's where I grew up.
Awesome.
Hmm.
And what about your Jewish education?
So I went to Hebrew Academy of Suffolk County from first to eighth grade, which no longer exists. It was a school for really all Jews across Long Island, and it was a big mixed bag, melting pot of different ideologies and levels of religiosity. I then, after eighth grade, I went to a yeshiva high school, Mesivta of Roslyn, also does not exist anymore. Very small school. I graduated 12th grade with 5 boys in my class. It was an all boys yeshiva high school. I then, post high school, spent a couple of years learning in yeshiva full time. Then, yeah, went on from there to do all sorts of different things.
Okay, and so tell us about your professional world. Were you always like a storyteller? Were you kind of crafting stories like this? Because you work in ads.
Yeah.
So kind of tell us, how did you go? And also you studied psychology. So what did the kind of career trajectory look like?
Yeah. So when you mentioned like dreams in your opening introduction, I remember from a very young age liking two things. I liked ads. So I always really liked watching ads, reading ads, looking at ads. And I remember from really young thinking that one day I would be like the one sitting around the table coming up with ideas for ads.
Like Mad Men?
Like, yeah, well, I didn't have Mad Men at the time, but and I was probably watching like commercials on TV, and we don't write commercials for TV at all. So what we do is not as glamorous or as interesting, maybe even as creative on a day-to-day basis as I had dreamt of. But the other thing was like I always wanted to write a story. I wanted to publish a book. I remember that also from a very young age. Um, so I got into advertising because I was initially attempting to make a career as an artist. I was selling paintings, sort of like abstract impressionist, um, large format canvases. I was exhibiting, this was like right around the time I was married. I got married back in 2012, and I was exhibiting at art festivals all along Long Island, East Coast. I had a few gallery showings, and it was difficult and challenging, and it's not easy to sell art. One day I was driving back from an art festival. I had all the canvases bungee to the top of the car. It started raining. The canvases got ruined. It was a big ordeal. I schlepped them up to our apartment. And I say to myself, like, I need to have a website. Like, I really need to have a website. But I'm not a tech savvy kid. I wasn't raised around tech. I didn't have a laptop growing up. Like, none of that. Um, and I thought that like a website was something very out of reach. And it was something like only like really expensive European developers could do. Um, but then the next day I heard an ad on the radio for a company called Squarespace. We are now much more familiar with Squarespace. It's sort of a no-code drag and drop website builder, but it wasn't so big in 2013. They were just getting started, and like their main form of advertising was the radio. So I heard an ad on the radio. It promised that anybody could make a website. I was skeptical, but I sat down, and I think I like sat probably for 20 hours without getting up, and I made a website for my artwork, which was really exciting. It's like, wow, I have a checkout, I have a cart, I can make my pricing, it's connected to my bank account. I was like, this is it. Like I'm done. I've made it. But then the next question became like, once you get your mother and your sister to visit the site, like, how do you get other people to come to a website? So that question led me down into the world of internet advertising, Google, Facebook, understanding like the big players in online advertising, how it works. And it fascinated me. I really liked it because there was, on one hand, it was very immediate. Like you could, within 15 minutes, go to Google. Google's still today the world's largest, most successful advertising company. Out of its, I don't know, $250 billion in annual revenue, 96% of it comes from ad clicks. Like
Mhm.
that's what Google does. We don't, a consumer or a user of Google doesn't think of Google as an advertising company, but that's what it is. So you could have an ad campaign very quickly. So there's a lot of there's a scientific component to it. Like how much should I? It's all a live auction. Every search on Google is a live auction where thousands of advertisers are submitting bids to show their ad for any individual Google search. So that was cool. Like, how do you figure out what should I bid? Well, I'm selling my art for this amount of money, and how many people who actually click an ad and come to my site are going to purchase the art, and how would I even think about like that question? And it was also creative because you were able to write ads and design ads, and you had to like think through messaging, like what would appeal to somebody to get them to click. And okay, so that's how I got into it. I got into it because I was trying to figure out how to sell my artwork. And after some time, and you realize, okay, like maybe your artwork is not that good, and it's a lot harder to sell anything, no matter how quick or immediate you can get traffic to a site. It's not easy to sell something. But I learned a lot. I had been learning a lot about Google advertising, Facebook advertising. I felt like I had a reasonably good understanding of how these systems worked, like under the hood. And I said maybe I could charge. I needed to make money. Like that was the driving force of my life. Like make money. I had to make money. And like maybe I could teach other people how to do it. I can manage it for other people. So like manage their Google campaigns for other businesses. So I started like doing that. And I wasn't doing it as like a long-term career, but I was certainly doing it seriously. Like I was working very hard at it. I was working around the clock. And at some point, like I got a couple clients, hired my first employee, moved to an office, and then like it's like, okay, well, this is my career. So we've grown organically over the years. We have a really good reputation. For about 45 people now, across 3 offices. We're here. I'm sitting here in Woodmere. Then we have Boca in Florida and Philly,
Mm.
and it's what I do. So and I love
I
it.
mean, that you seem like a self-starter. You seem like you have an idea and then you need to do the things to get the idea done. And if you don't know how to do it, you'll just figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I would say that that's accurate. Yeah.
Do you think that your Jewish education like helped you see the world like that at all? Like I think some of that is certainly like personality types, but I see certain Torah sources as very much
Mhm.
like influencing that type of behavior. I don't know if you've thought about that before.
I definitely have, and I think personally feel that my Jewish upbringing is enormously relevant to like that personality. I think sometimes we call it chutzpah. It's a little bit irreverent,
Mhm.
and it's often framed negatively. I don't see it that way. I think there's an obnoxious type of chutzpah, obviously. There's an obnoxious type of irreverence. We could sense that right away. But then there's a much more attractive, I would say, side to that coin. Um, I think at at the very top level, everything about Jewish identity and Jewish culture to me is a rejection of victimhood. Like we reject the idea that we're victims. And if you look to me, this is a very generational thing. We have been persecuted, but we don't consider ourselves at like a people at the whims of tragic outcomes.
Hmm.
Like we don't feel that the more Greek mythological take on tragedy is it's we don't believe in it, right? So we believe that tragic things can happen, unfortunate things can happen, setbacks are temporary, but we have it within ourselves to put our own fingerprint as an active participant in our own life, and it's nobody else is to blame but ourselves for that. So we're very in turn, like I would say, introspective people. We're people who believe that we have the solutions within us and the power to find them and the power to execute them. And I think that creates a very healthy form of chutzpah. Like I deserve a seat at the table. I can find the answer. I can do it. I might not know how. I might not have all the tools. I might not have taken a traditional path, but there's no reason that I can't succeed. Because on the flip side, I also believe that there's something in me that's also the source of all my problems. Um, so I think that sort of that national identity and mentality is present in a major way in all of us in the things that we do. Um, and I think that had a big impact on like, yeah, being like we could like, self-starting and saying, let's say take the book, for example. I've never taken a writing course. Um, I don't know most of English grammar. Um, and I would tell people like that I'm writing a book, and they would at first find it to be like cute, interesting, but then I'd be like, no, I'm actually taking it really seriously. I'm waking up every morning, like I have ambition. And then it becomes almost like a little bit of a scorn, upset, negative view of it because like you didn't put in all the prerequisite building blocks that should grant you a seat at that table. You haven't been to the world's best or the country's best Master of Fine Arts programs. You don't know literature well, and that comes from them knowing and seeing, and so many other people who are, I would say, taking a more classical, conventional approach, maybe more rational, and we have a little bit of an irreverence to that paradigm.
Yeah, I hear that. I think we get a similar reaction in our work in Hollywood, kind of like, what's your background? How did you get here? What makes you think that you deserve a seat at the table? And it's more like, I saw a problem. I saw there's a solution. We went out and did it. I
Right.
had a couple Jewish sources in my mind when I asked the question. One is Nasa V'Nishma,
Hmm.
that when the Jewish people took the Torah on, they did it before they understood it
Hmm.
because part of our mentality is that we do the thing and then we learn how to do it. And that's always been a thing that how I've gotten things started. I didn't know it was a Torah source until I started becoming observant, but it very much aligns with my way of doing things. And the other thing is Hishtadlis versus bitachon, that there's this concept that in Judaism, it's out on us to put the effort out, to put the hishtadlis out, and then it's on God to make the outcomes ultimately happen, that we have trust in God's plan, but it's on us to put out the efforts, and then if it's supposed to be God's will that it should happen, it will. And I think that is so much the source of the chutzpah, that all we're told, all we have to do is put out the effort, and
Yeah.
if it's meant to be, then God will it. That's such an empowering way to look at the world, because if I just start the process, then maybe I'll be, successful in it. And it's not for me to worry or not whether it's a success. I just have to get in and do the work. So, okay, so take us through the practicality of, you're writing the book, people think that it's chutzpahdik. How do you go from, is it just a really awesome manuscript that gets you in the door? Is it not giving up and sending it out to a million people? Like, what's the secret sauce of going from I wrote to getting this, 6-figure advance 3-book deal?
It's a great question. Um, I think I definitely wouldn't say anything about really awesome at all. Like it's because it's so subjective. It's so subjective. But I would say table stakes, right? Table stakes is you have to have a polished, call it a polished manuscript. But I took the writing of it very seriously. So let's say like my a little bit my angle is like I understand marketing. I'm an advertising executive. That gives me a big leg up. Publishing companies want to make money like anybody else. Agents, and just very quickly, the way publishing works is that a publishing house will never buy a manuscript from an author. They will only buy a manuscript from your agent. There's a limited number of agents in the US that represent middle grade fiction, which is where I was writing in. I think there's like 400 or so. They receive 8 to 10,000 queries a year. A query is an author like myself, an unpublished author, reaching out with their manuscript saying, will you look at this? Because an agent doesn't take money up front. An agent only gets paid on money that you get paid over the course of your lifetime. They'll take typically 15% of your lifetime earnings. So an agent has to really believe in what you're doing, and they have to believe that they can sell your work to a publisher. And the way acquisition editors are the people at a publishing house that buy the work from an agent. So the agent has to believe that the acquisition editors that they work with or that they know are going to likely purchase this, and also that you're going to have a long-term career. Fine. So they're getting 8 to 10,000 queries a year, and they're taking 3 to 5 clients a year. So it's like really just statistically speaking, it's very, very hard. But it goes back to your concept of hishtadlis and hope. I feel like the Jewish nation is the most, to me, the most fundamental attribute of the Jewish people is the idea of hope, where it's an almost irrational, non-statistics oriented way of being that looks at extraordinary and unlikely outcomes and conducts life as if those things are like really
Possible.
And you look at other people and other identities, and this idea of hope, there's there's desire, there's wanting, but like a hopeful people, like it really it's an incredible characteristic.
And it's the name of our national anthem of Israel. The
Yeah,
Israeli national anthem is
yeah,
Hatikva,
yeah,
hope.
yeah. And I think that my own career, I would say, is like this idea of an optimistic, I call it idiotic optimism. You can call it hope, whatever. There's different ways. Like I think it's probably the most important driving force in what I've done. So where was I going with that? Okay, yeah, it's not easy. So you have to have a good manuscript. That's starting point. And I took the writing very seriously. I worked with a lot of great editors, rewrote the book many, many times, even when friends and family and beta readers thought it was great. I got editorial. So
How long was the writing process?
it was like 5, 6 years, but you have to understand that I was doing it not full time while I was working, but also 2.5 years of that or 3 years of that was editing and rewriting and rewriting. And so I was very open to criticism, very open to feedback. If I was working with an editor who was like, this has to go, or this is not important, then you might be like, you know how long it takes to select all and delete 20,000 words? 3 seconds. But it could take 9 months to have written that. And you agonized over it and you refined it and you polish it, but then it's like, it's got to go. So like everything was in service. To me, it was not a passion pursuit of me needing to unpack my trauma onto the page. None of that. It was purely what will sell, what is commercial, what will a kid like to read. So it's as impersonal to me as I have friends who are reading the book and being like, I'm trying to understand where I show up in this and where you show up in this, what I know from your childhood. I really tried to leave all of that out.
Okay, but you did put some Jewish stuff in. Can you talk about what
Yes.
Jewish stuff you did put in?
So the stuff so what I did want was Jewish representation, for lack of a better word. But I just felt the truth is I felt that it was so interesting. Some of these motifs were so interesting to me and compelling that they make for great story. Um, for example, you have the Altercocker tribe. Now they're like we sort of would think of Altercockers. They're outcasts. They're easily agitated. They're rough around the edges, but they have hearts of gold. And you contrast them with the scribes. The scribes are more of like the pietistic, morally straight, but a little bit less emotionally warm group that are tasked with the most important, I'd say, responsibilities in the world, and they feel that, and they conduct themselves as such, but they're a little bit cold, and their obsession with their responsibility has led them to some little bit of a blindness, naivete, let's say, or blindness, whether it's willing or unwilling, to the boots on the ground reality of what's playing out in everyday life and the lives of the everyday people that aren't as revered. So I don't know, like that motif was to me relevant through my years in yeshiva a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think that like pulling on, and it's not about labeling one way right or wrong. I think it's, to me, it was about showing that these are two reasonable and relatable ways of thinking. But when crises arises, like when there are real stakes and real things matter, then those what seem to be slight differences in approach become very, very important, very relevant, very high stakes. So yeah, and I would say lastly, from a Jewish perspective, there's this concept. There's a very strong concept in the book of Light and Shadow, that what I was trying to express is that a person is not either all good or all bad, and I think we believe this. I think it's a core tenet of Judaism that we're a penitential culture. We believe in repentance, we believe in forgiveness, and we believe in a continuum of growth, of progress. And I think that our culture today, and I was sort of trying, again, through the lens of entertainment, everything's supposed to be fun. I'm not trying to teach lessons in the book, but I think today we are training our kids to see something as either like right, wrong, and whatever it is, it then colors and shades every tributary and offshoot we could think of about that person or about that object, good, bad. This is true in politics. It's true, and like this is what people mean when they say polarization, right? Like things are so extreme that we'll lie, steal, and cheat just to maintain a narrative that conforms to some pre-existing idea or belief, rather than suffer the discomfort and the cognitive dissonance with having to allow for there to be paradoxes and dichotomies in your behavior. So there's a motif in the book of Light and Shadow that a person really needs both of those things. Like there's negative elements and negative energies. There's positive impulses, and those two things together are what create a compelling human being or a complete human being. So it's sort of the protagonist's job to reassemble or reintegrate I don't want to give any spoilers away, but to reintegrate a key figure in his life through understanding and being taught by both the scribes and the Altercockers that the light and shadow components to us is what creates the most compelling, interesting object in God's mind and in everybody's mind.
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to wrap up the how you got the agent, how you sold the books. Let's make sure to get to that. Yeah. So, and I took you off course.
No, it's really it required a lot of persistence, and you hear this a lot, right? It almost sounds cliche. You're going to get a lot of rejection, but then you go and face all that rejection for the course, over the course of 4 years, and then you have to keep getting up the next day with the same level of energy, the same level of excitement as if that rejection never occurred. So the agent that is representing me now is an agent that passed, declined. He looked at my manuscript and he declined it 5 years in 2022, 4 years ago, let's say. late 2021. And I emailed him again. First I got, again, this is one story in 100 of such similar stories. Somebody who I knew through another agent that passed sent it to a literary agency that he works at. I received confirmation, an email thread that this guy was on, that my agent was on. I had never spoken to this agent, but the owner of the agency, or the one of the partners of the agency, was just sending it back to a contact that I was associated with. And buried deep in that email thread was this email from Pete saying, nice compliments about the book, but right now it's not for him. He doesn't have that special spark, whatever. So first, I just found that email, and I spent a long time emailing him directly, updating the manuscript, until he finally rejected me so outrightly that it was like, okay, it'll be inappropriate to reach out again. But then 3 years later, I still reached back out to him. And I said, like, look, I updated the manuscript again. A few different things have changed, whatever. Would you be interested right now in taking another look? And he responded in 10 minutes. He's saying, oh, yeah, I remember you. Like, I'd love to take another look. Sure. I sent the manuscript, and it's timing. It's the right, it's persistence. It was maybe the right updates I needed to make. And he wrote back that he started reading the book and he didn't think he was going to get to it until the weekend. And he said, I couldn't put it down. I absolutely love it. And we want to represent you.
Wow.
And then that weekend it was on submission at on the desks of all the heads of the biggest publishing companies in the world. So
Amazing.
yeah, it's interesting. And usually if you're starting a business, you get little feedback mechanisms. There's a feedback mechanism. Even when things are not going great, but you do a small thing, you close a deal, you repaint your office. There's like little like nice things that are happening that are giving you a dopamine hit that compel you forward.
Hmm.
With writing, it was not that. It's 5 years of utter loneliness, zero positive reinforcement. Really just the opposite. It's all you're getting is negative reinforcement. And you have to somehow be able to block and compartmentalize all of that, because you're not getting anything positive. All you're receiving is negative feedback. The chance of it succeeding are unbelievably slim. And you have to find within yourself some hopeful impulse um, that gets you out of bed and in front of the computer or in front of your notepad every morning or every day, whatever it is that you're writing. So it was I felt very validated and good that whatever happens with the book, whether it fails, it succeeds, it takes off, it doesn't. I think I feel accomplished in the sense that I saw my own self through a project that had no chance of succeeding and no positive element of reinforcement, and I pushed through, and I got it done to what I think was the best that I'm capable of.
Amazing. It's really, I mean, kind of going now like into Pesach and like this sort of season of redemption now. I think we have to believe that like crazy things, hopeful things are possible, and just sort of like bringing this into like the national story of the Jewish people, thousands of years of exile, persecution and hate, sort of rising to historic levels in our lifetime, but having this audacious hopefulness, that things could get better, that things will be better. It's such a great model that you are modeling personally in the story. I think everybody listening can take this for their own personal projects, and I hope for our national story to hope that there will be peaceful times, redemptive times, soon in our future.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's like a really interesting element around Pesach, especially bringing the kids involved, right? Kids and storytelling. We see how important that is, and it is a holiday where we're thankful, we're hopeful. Yeah,
All right, well, this is an incredible conversation, and thank you for not quitting, because it's such a good model for the people that are stuck now in the parts. And I remember for years at Jew in the City having meetings of one, being told that this was going nowhere, having my mother, my best friend saying like, "What are you doing?" And it's not until you get to the point of success that anyone's like, "Oh yeah, well now it makes sense." So thank you for this amazing story and efforts. And we wish you continued success in all that you do.
Allison, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and being able to having the opportunity to leverage your platform to share this story and to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Pleasure. Chag Sameach, and you can catch us same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.